Welcome to the Versa Business Tips Podcast. I'm your host, founder, and CEO of Versa Business Systems, Shaheen Mazloom. We're with a really special guest today, Paul Neal. He's the CEO of ownyourbuildingnow.com. So he's helping business owners go from leasing their building to owning their building. Thanks for joining us today, Paul. I'm super excited to dive into this conversation.
Yeah, Shaheen, my pleasure. I'm excited to talk about it, man.
Absolutely, man. So for those out there that don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got into this.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a recovering engineer. It's what I studied way back in the day in school. Didn't really like working in the field, but was good in math and science. And so got into, in the late 90s, got into real estate finance. So I've been in real estate finance since literally 1998. I think I did my first transaction. Started on the residential side and then started moving into working with business owners and entrepreneurs was kind of my thing. And along the way have owned some businesses, but eventually because my crowd, my tribe are business owners, entrepreneurs, that's really who I focus with and who I love to work with. And I started to realize that there were opportunities that they were leaving on the table when it came to real estate. I'd have a lot of these guys come to me and want to buy investment properties and things like that. I'm like, okay, yeah, we're rich dad, poor dad. We're going to build that portfolio. We're going to do all that.
Right.
But so many of them had thriving businesses that were throwing off cash, and they had a need for a local presence. Like the HVAC company, the plumbing company, the vet. They weren't going anywhere. They had patients and customers and employees right there. I'm like, hey, why don't you buy the building you're in? You're right now you're giving somebody else rent, all this money, a lot of wasted opportunity. And so anyway, kind of tripped into that a number of years ago, and it's been my passion ever since. And so now that's kind of really my main focus is helping those people accelerate their wealth accumulation through building ownership.
Right. That's great, man. Like when I first found out about your business, it just made sense, right? Like as business owners, we take in leasing a building or an office space as that's just a part of doing business, right? Like that's an expense that you're going to incur. And, with us doing business funding, every now and then, maybe it's like 1% of the time people are looking to borrow capital to purchase their building, but it's very rare, right? And you just go to thinking about it. It's like, okay, well, if you're in a shopping center and you're paying rent in that shopping center and you're not going anywhere, why not figure out a way to own that? Is it, real estate right now is pretty tough on the residential side. Is it the same way on the commercial side right now? Or tell us about what's going on in the market.
You mean in terms of like supply and that sort of thing? Okay. Yeah. Supply it can be challenging. There's a lot of demand for what you see a lot of the local service providers type business, like, like the flex warehouse space, right? Where you're going to have your offices in the front and then space in the back. And so, a lot of times the option might be to build. We have a client right now. He's a renovation company, and he's local, and so he's building a steel building, 12,000 square feet. He's going to be in the front part of that, and he's going to actually lease out part of it, but he used a lot of the space for his equipment and so forth. And that's a really good story too. We can get into later if you want in terms of some of the benefits from that. But so the cool thing is if you can't find it, you can build it. Now, building it is more expensive. It's more involved than, finding something out there. But I found that, if you know what you're looking for and you team up with the right commercial real estate agent in the area, then you can find the property. Again, it's different from residential where you would, drop in, you decide today I'm going to move and, you're in contract and close in 30 days. This process is a lot longer. Right. And I suggest people start thinking about it, 6 months, 12 months, 24 months out before they, start pulling the trigger, just because it is different. There's a lot involved to it. But you'd be amazed at the opportunities that are out there, if it's weighed in an intelligent manner. Rates kind of peaked up a few months ago, kind of with the bond yields and you saw it with residential, but they've started coming back down. The Fed's pretty much signaled they're done raising rates. They're going to cut a couple of times this year, right? So I think the worst is behind us there in terms of the financing side. And so I say, when's a great opportunity? It's really when it makes sense for you, right? If your business is growing, you got cash flow, it's something to be considering.
And what is it? When is a good time for a business to say, okay, well, now makes sense for us to start looking into purchasing the building we're in? Is it when they're like, hey, look, we made it past that first year, we got good cash flow coming in, I don't see us going anywhere, things are going well? Or is it, as soon as they have some extra money to be able to make that purchase? I mean, when does a business owner know, hey, now's a good time to start looking into this?
Yeah, I would say generally you want to see, 3, 4, 5 years into the business where you have a successful track record. You've weathered a couple of storms along the way. You've grown, right? Because we all have them in business. You've made some adjustments. You've grown. You've got some employees, so now you need space, and you can sort of forecast out your needs a few years downstream. So cash stability, cash flow stability, really, or growth is the primary things we look at. Right. But it's not really unlike if you go to lease a new office space. If you're growing, the landlord wants to see your financials. They want to see your business history, because they don't want to put a tenant in a 3 or a 5 year lease that can't pay. Yeah. The difference is you might be personally guaranteeing a lease, and of course you have no property. You may be personally guaranteeing a building that you own, but at least you have a tangible asset versus someone else. So really, we like to see 3 to 4 years with a track record. Don't really do many startups. There's just a lot of risk there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I don't think
probably tough to get approved as far as financing anyway, unless you've got close to 5 years of business, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can get it if you have a strong enough personal balance sheet and credit and that sort of thing, and a good business plan. But generally not recommended. Like I said, 3 to 5 years is a good place that you can seriously start looking at it.
Right.
If you've been in business for yourself, you've got a growing business for longer than that, and you're local, then you're literally, burning opportunity every day.
Right. Now let's talk about the requirements, right? So obviously you got to have decent financials. A lot of people that come to us, especially for funding, it's because they can't go to a bank because they've got credit in the 500s or 600s. With purchasing commercial real estate, if you've got 5 to 10 years in business, your balance sheet looks great, your tax returns are great, but you're maybe in that 550 to 650 credit score, is buying even really an option, or there's still ways to make it work?
Yeah, I mean, if the credit's challenged, if the score's challenged, there are ways to make it work, assuming that the other pieces to the business are strong. Right. So, and assuming there's a story behind the credit, right? If it's 550 to 600 because there's been a history of bad payment, then that's one thing. If it's 550 to 600 because you had a life event 2 years before and went to the hospital and had issues and all that, since have recovered, but before that and after that, you've had a good track record in paying your bills, then that's a whole different story. And so there's no hard and fast, you got to have X amount. It's like 3 legs to the stool we like to look at. You got credit, collateral, and cash flow. So if 2 of the 3 are in good shape, then there's a lot of opportunity. We had one that recently, this guy owned a couple pizza restaurants and immigrated here a number of years ago. And they were locally based businesses, right? So he had them for 8 or 9 years. And one day, the owner of the building, he leased both spaces. The owner of the building said, "Hey, I'm going to sell this building." Well, our borrower, Osmond, he had put about $80,000 into the kitchen over that period of time. He'd worked out his systems and all that. All of his clientele was local, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, I want to buy this building." And fortunately, the owner gave him the opportunity to do that. Now, he had a couple of issues that we had to work through and work around, but because at least 2 of those 3 legs on the stool were strong, we were able to get it done. And he's able to, defensively buy his position, because if he had to go find another pizza restaurant, start over, I mean, what's the likelihood of all of his local clients, following him if he had to go more than a mile or 2 away, because there's a pizza restaurant, it seems like on every corner. So if, like I said, if a lot of the picture looks good, then there's still a shot.
Way to make it work.
Yeah,
so
and
you said it was the 3. It was cash flow, credit, and what was the third one?
It was now you got me. So cash flow, credit, and collateral. So
collateral.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you have
got 2 out of the 3, cash flow, credit, collateral, there's usually a workaround to make it happen.
Yeah, because like on collateral, so in a lot of cases, if the business is cash flowing really well and the credit's really strong, we don't need hardly any collateral in terms of the building itself is collateral. And so generally you're looking at low down payment, 0 to 5 to 10%.
Wow.
But if you have maybe the cash flow is not great or the credit's not great, you might need 20 or 30% down to compensate for that. Right. So
I gotcha.
So there are ways to mitigate maybe a weakness. The other thing that we like to say to people, and this is why, thinking about it 6, 12, 24 months in advance of doing it, if we like to work with people at that stage because we want to identify early what the potholes are, and what the roadblocks going to be well before you get in the pressure of searching for properties, going under contract, engaging a realtor and all that. So
make sure you get it done first, or what you need to do in order to get it done.
Yeah. And we have I think it's 53 or 54 questions that we make you answer up front. It doesn't take long, but it covers a lot of issues that up front that now can be addressed. And we can have a game plan to say, okay, well, you're going to have to do X, Y, and Z here, but then you're good, or that's not going to be a problem or whatever. Because as you know, being in finance today, you can't hide anything. They're going to find out.
Yeah.
Particularly when it comes to real estate finance. Yeah. I mean, it's going to come, you're going to get it. They're going to be serious due diligence, and you're better off. Let's deal with it up front.
Yeah.
And, it
blows my mind the amount of times that people will, lie about something. Like, did you really think that they weren't going to find that out? I mean, it's on Google, for Christ's sake.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So it's part of I tell people too, speaking of the Google thing, I tell business owners that, when we talk about credit, we normally think about a credit score. And, so you have your personal credit score, you have a business credit score like a Dun & Brad. But the thing today we also have is a social credit score from a standpoint of what are those Google reviews? If you've got, if you've got awful Google reviews,
they might kill a deal altogether because people don't like you. Yeah,
because lenders were like, hey, your customers don't even like you. I don't know that you're going to be a good risk for us to invest the money in. So it's important to, to operate in a glass house today. And
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk about the benefits. I mean, besides the obvious, renting is obviously going to be more expensive than owning the building. If you're in a building with multiple different businesses, there's an opportunity to make a profit there. What are the other benefits? I'm assuming there's some tax benefits, but what are the kind of the main benefits when it comes to going from leasing the building you're in now to purchasing it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you hit on a couple of the big ones, but there are many more. So rent, obviously, you're just burning dollars every month. And, you're foregoing the opportunity to build equity in a property, the opportunity to lease out part of your space and have somebody pay the freight. Going back to that warehouse story from early on, Adam, our client, is leasing out 4,000 of the 12,000 feet. And that 4,000, it's high demand flex warehouse space. And so what he's getting on the leases will actually pay the whole mortgage. So he's going from paying rent net negative to positive into a $1 million building that's now gonna somebody else is paying the freight and it's appreciating. Now here's the other thing though. Here's a benefit that people don't think about. So he's leasing out this space, and let's assume his business continues to grow. Well, 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now, instead of him having to move necessarily, he cannot renew one of the leases on the space and just expand into the building that he already owns that somebody else has paid for. Taxes it's a huge benefit. Generally, when you buy what we call owner occupied commercial real estate, you're going to set up an operating company. And you're not going to set that up. That is your business, but you're going to set up a real estate holding company that's going to buy the real estate. So essentially, your real estate holding company is going to lease the building to your operating company. Yeah. And so there's some depreciation advantages there, some taxable, some things you can do with offsetting the lease payment. So this one's got an expense with lease. This one is offsetting the revenue with depreciation. And so,
right.
So you can do tax magic legally, consult your CPA, right? You can accelerate some of the depreciation from a building. You can do 1031 exchanges if you decide in the future you want to move to a larger building or whatever. You can do that. I have a couple of clients that young guys. I say young, they're in their 30s, but they got into the car wash business, and their whole strategy was to do like McDonald's did, and they were gonna find strategic real estate locations to build their car washes. And if the car washes would just generate enough revenue to basically pay the expenses and give them a little salary, their plan was to grow and sort of continue to get nicer and nicer locations. And what they did is their early facilities were kind of we'll just call them entry level. They weren't that nice, right? But they were able to sell those and take the capital gains and roll it through what's called a 1031 exchange, tax-free, into the next property. So it allowed them to leverage up. So dial the clock forward 15 years, they sold their enterprise for a very nice 8-figure sum. And it was the real estate value, essentially. So you have that. You have the ability to have control, like we talked about the pizza guy. You can control. Nobody's going to tell you have to leave. Nobody's going to raise rents on you when the lease comes up, or say, hey, Shaheen, by the way, we're not going to renew your lease because we have something else we want to use the property for.
Right.
And when you're building out someone else's business, to suit your either your workflows or your customer flows. Think about a veterinarian will help. They want to create an experience for the dogs, but they want to create experience for the owners. So, it's kind of a foo-foo place. But if you do that with somebody else's building, you're building their equity, right?
Exactly. At any point in time, they can say, hey, you know what? Time's up. I got to do something else with this space. And what are you going to do?
Right. Right. And probably one of the biggest things too is like a lot of small business guys I see, when they get a successful business, they've got cash flow. But the thing is, a lot of us tend to spend up to our level of income, right? So,
make more, spend more.
Yeah, and then more, right? And so, buying the building forces a savings plan, right? If you forget all the other benefits, but if you're like, okay, I'm going to plow this $5,000 or $6,000 or $10,000 a month into my building versus just paying for it on rent. I've got a fixed expense now versus an increasing one through rent. So what do you have 15 years later?
Yeah.
So Kathy, one of my friends, she's a client. She's a doctor, OBGYN. Her husband literally kicked her in the tail to buy the building for her local practice like 12 or 13 years ago. So they did that, and they've been paying on the building. So paid the building off. About 2 years ago, she was acquired by one of these larger medical groups that are buying up the smaller ones,
Yeah.
And so she got basically a buyout for her business. She gets to work in the business another 3 to 4 years before she retires. Right. And, by the way, all the patients are right there coming to her building and practice. They're like, hey, we're going to go ahead and lease the building from you for as long as you want to do that. And so there's a nice, I don't know what she's getting, 10, 12,000 a month, and just retirement cash flow on the building on top of everything else. That, hey, Shaheen, she wouldn't have gotten it if she didn't do that. And you and I know 12 years are going to pass either way.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
So it becomes a forced savings or retirement plan, not to mention the value to the sale of the business if you do want to sell it, if you're selling the real estate.
It sounds like a no-brainer. If you got two of those three things, the collateral, the credit, the cash flow, you got 4 or 5 years in business, you're not going anywhere. It sounds like a complete no-brainer. And
I think that's a good point too. You're not going anywhere. If your goal is to exit the business in 2 or 3 years, don't bother. But if you think, hey, this is something I'm going to, got 10, 15 years in or more, maybe it's something you want to pass down to your kids or whatever, next generation, it's definitely a no-brainer.
No. So that brings up a good, another question I have. So why, if you're going to sell the business, even if you're doing it in 3 or 4 years, why would that maybe not make sense to purchase?
Well, I think the biggest reason is that, real estate is cyclical, and, you're going to incur some cost up front when you get into, a new building and whatnot. And we can't really predict. Nobody can, I don't think. Maybe AI will. I don't know. Maybe Elon can. really what's going to happen over the next 12 to 24 to 36 months in really any market, right?
Right.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah, and so we could have a great run. It could be flat, it could be down, but ultimately we know like real estate over time, it's going to appreciate.
Yeah.
So you have time for the benefits to play out. If you're on a 5 to 10 year to 15-year plan
Makes
versus
sense.
a 3, you're just rolling the dice, man.
You're rolling the dice. Like, it may work out, it may not. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Very cool. So what is your, so besides helping businesses go from leasing to purchasing, you guys do some other things as well for businesses. Is that right?
Yeah, we do. I mean, mostly it's around, again, real estate investing. So for business owners, and high net worth investors that are investing, we do a lot of single family, multifamily, and that types of investing to let them build their portfolio, because we're huge advocates of that. We think real estate is great, if not the best asset class, one of them, right, that you want to have. And we do some acquisitions as well, but the real estate is really kind of our primary bread and butter, helping those business owners take the success they've got and accelerate it, and build something long-term and lasting is the goal. And, because
you would say that purchasing the building they're operating out of would be the first thing they should do.
Well, maybe not. Yeah, not necessarily. It depends on the situation. It needs to be, if they check the boxes of, like we've talked about, they've got a growing, consistent business with a track record.
They've got,
Also depends on how much time is left on the lease. If they've got 5 years on their lease, we might want to be thinking strategically and let's do some other things in the interim. But if they've got 6 months, you better jump on it, right? So it depends on that. And so
now, are most landlords like open to selling? Like, is a lot of the time you're, like the owner just going to the current landlord saying, "Hey, I'm interested in purchasing your building," and they're like, "Sure, why not?" Or like, how does that go? I mean, I can imagine that conversation's not the easiest one to have. I mean, are they just open to selling most of the time, or?
I'd say generally not.
Okay.
If they've got an asset, it's not that much unlike multifamily. So if you're a multifamily investor and you're building your portfolio and your property is cash flowing, and you're like, okay, I'm building this for my family or whatever. You're not ready to sell it to the tenant or anyone. But let's say you inherited a multifamily and you're like, oh, I don't really want to be in real estate finance or a tenant, landlord, or whatnot. And so that's where a lot of those multifamily deals come from, right? They're inherited. The kids don't want to deal with it, and so you can buy it. When it comes to I say buy the building you're in, it's kind of a moniker. It's might not be the building you're specifically in, but those opportunities do come up. It just depends on the situation. Again, the owners, they might be ready to retire or punch out. We see that on the business acquisition side sometimes when someone's looking to expand and buy a competitor.
I got you. So maybe it may not be by their current building, but maybe by their next location.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Makes sense for sure.
Yeah, because that was kind of one of the things I was thinking about. I'm like, well, if I own their building and I'm making that rent, I don't know if I'm gonna sell it to that guy. But that makes sense. If they're looking to move somewhere else, expand. Because you hear of businesses move, especially in the restaurant industry. They're moving all the time.
Yeah.
And they're going from one lease to the next. So if you're one of those people, reach out to Paul.
Yeah, I would love to help you get an anchor somewhere on a piece of land.
Yeah, man. So since COVID, a lot of companies have gone remote. We're starting to see a big influx of, I know some big corporate companies that have been remote for the last few years, and now they've rebuilt their office space and they're getting everybody back in there. Are you seeing things come around pretty heavily, or is it still, like 2021, 2022, where a lot of people are still remote?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. They're not. They're repopulating offices. It's the bigger ones aren't generally going 5 days a week. They're going 3 or some kind of a hybrid model. But the small business guys, us small business guys learned that most of our staff don't work too well remotely.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It
You know,
takes a special person.
yeah. And the big businesses know it for sure because they look at
Yeah.
analytics and all that. And they're like, okay,
Yeah.
well, this is not working real
Right.
well for us. And a good friend of mine who owns ironically, an office space, like they sell furniture and they go in and do redesigns at a very high level. And we were together just, I don't know, a few months ago, and he's laughing about all the companies and how much money they're re-spending on like stuff he did, 3 years ago. They wanted an open concept. Now they all want like quiet workspaces, and they're bringing everybody back. And he's just going to the bank both directions. So
it's crazy.
Yeah. So I mean, I wouldn't. And, again, and we're not advocating to buy, an office building and, a 10-story building in downtown New York. I mean, I think those places are going to have a hard time, but your 4,000 square foot building, your 10,000 square foot building in middle America somewhere, that stuff is in super high demand. And because most of those businesses have customers or patients or clients that are coming in, right?
Yeah.
In addition to employees. So, so it's definitely in high demand.
For sure, man. Dude, I love this conversation. Like, real estate is exciting to me. I just, there's one thing that we haven't touched base on, and that's land. So do you also help, people always tell me, there's one thing that's never going to be created more of again, and that's land, right? There's never going to be more land created. Do you also help businesses? I know you mentioned the guy that's building. Do you suggest business owners start looking at purchasing land to be able to build gas stations or, strip malls or whatever it may be? I see every time you're going up the highway, you're always seeing land for sale. What's your take on land versus something that's already built? Is it going to be more profitable, but you need more money up front, or what are you generally seeing?
Yeah. Land is a riskier investment. And so the numbers and the terms are a lot different. When you buy land, you really need a very specific reason to buy it, right?
Okay.
So if you're going to buy, you mentioned a couple things in there. So if you're going to buy a piece of land because you want to build your building on of some type, whether it's your law firm or your warehouse or whatever, and it's in a timeline of a couple of years, and you have the money, you just want to buy a piece of land and sit on it, that's fine. You're like, hey, that's going to be the ideal location. Most of what we do is we sort of do it as a package. So like, okay, we want to build over here, and so the land is $300,000-$400,000 or whatever. They're going to buy the land, but it's also part of the overall. Here's the build plans and whatnot. But again, that's owner occupied. If they want to buy land for like a strip mall or something like that, that's a completely different animal, because now we're talking in not owner occupied commercial space, but investment commercial. And that can be really profitable, and we do it, but there aren't too many people there aren't too many investors that will just finance that piece of land and sit on it, for a developer. That's generally where a developer has to have some experience and maybe some private equity or whatever to go sit on that. Yeah.
Right. Definitely, man. Well, it's been great talking to you. Looking forward to seeing more of you on social media. I'll make sure to put your handles and all that stuff in the description. You got anything else for our viewers and listeners before we end today? Yeah,
awesome. So they can, if they want to head over to my webpage, ownyourbuildingnow.com, ownyourbuildingnow.com. I've got a book I wrote called Unleash Your Business, and How to Unlock Wealth, Autonomy, and Control by Buying Your Building and Firing Your Landlord. Awesome. And it's a quick read. You can read a couple hours as a business owner. That's free. Just pay for the shipping so I can send it out to you. Cool. The other thing I have on there is a 2-minute assessment. It's 20 questions. It's private. And it basically answers the question, is owning commercial property right for your business? Right. And so you go through, answer the questions, and when you're done, it gives you a customized report broken down into 4 different areas, like from financial and experience and that sort of thing, and some insights on, just kind of a benchmark, I guess, for you to kind of see where you are compared to wherever. So, and that's free. There's no charge for that at all. It's
very cool.
They're both at that same site, ownyourbuildingnow.com. And
awesome.
Yeah, that's it.
Very cool, man. So ownyourbuildingnow.com.
That's it. Thanks, Shaheen. I've enjoyed this, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us, Paul.